What's up, everybody? So yesterday on January 12th, 2024, Kathleen Zellner filed a new motion on behalf of Steven Avery. We have a copy of it, and it is 57 pages long, and I'm going to go over it here now. What I'm going to do, though, is break it up into separate videos. This is obviously part one. This one is the issues presented. Whether this court must conduct a review of the sufficiency of Steven Avery's motion for post-conviction relief on its face because of the circuit court's failure to conduct any such analysis as a matter of law. Whether the circuit court improperly imposed a burden on Steven Avery to conclusively prove the Denny motive element in order to satisfy the Denny prongs. Whether the circuit court erred when it did not correctly apply State versus Denny to Steven Avery's potential third-party suspect evidence. The court answered no to all of those. Statement on oral argument and publication. Appellate requests oral argument to facilitate review of the complex legal issues raised. A publication is warranted because the case of interest to the public. When dealing with stakes as high as the defendant's liberty, third-party perpetrator evidence walks into a bit of a tight slope. Without regard for Steven Avery's liberty, even after he has brought forth strong new evidence connecting a third party to Teresa Halbach's murder, the circuit court has denied Steven Avery the opportunity for an evidentiary hearing. Steven Avery now appeals the circuit court's denial of his amended third post-conviction motion because the circuit court's opinion is so legally and factually flawed that it does not even consider whether Steven Avery has alleged sufficient facts to warrant an evidentiary hearing. Instead, the circuit court erroneously interprets State versus Denny as requiring conclusive proof of motive to satisfy the requirement of State versus Edwards, and as requiring the alleged third-party suspect to have the necessary skills to manipulate evidence in a manner that would implicate the defendant to satisfy the opportunity prong of Denny. The circuit court's decision denying Steven Avery an evidentiary hearing on this new evidence of Bobby Dassey's possession of Teresa Halbach's vehicle is based on an irrational premise that Bobby could have been in possession of the car that night to help hide evidence to protect the two individuals directly linked by forensic evidence to this murder and convicted of the crime. Emphasis added. First, the circuit court is hugely mistaken in stating that Brendan Dassey was ever linked forensically to the crime. Now, he was never linked anything. There was no blood, there was no DNA, there was no evidence. There still is no evidence that Brendan Dassey was ever linked to this crime, that he ever committed this crime, that he was ever in Steven Avery's trailer, that he ever had anything to do with the death and disappearance of Teresa Halbach. He was not. Second, the circuit court erroneously relies upon evidence that was barred from being considered at Steven Avery's trial, such as Brendan Dassey's confession, to support its decision to deny Steven Avery an evidentiary hearing. The circuit court's speculation is that when Bobby moved Teresa Halbach's vehicle onto the Avery property, it was his intent to help his uncle by hiding evidence. This is contradicted by the fact that all of the forensic evidence used to convict Steven Avery was in the vehicle and was discovered because the vehicle had been moved onto the Avery property. Steven Avery's blood and DNA was in the vehicle. Teresa Halbach's electronic devices from her vehicle were found in Steven Avery's burn barrel, and the RAV4 key was later found in Steven Avery's bedroom. None of this incriminating evidence was discovered until the vehicle was brought back to the Avery salvage yard by Bobby. In the circuit court's nonsensical conclusion, because these actions could be seen as an effort by Bobby Dassey to help Steven Avery, he cannot be considered a valid third-party Denny suspect. The circuit court failed to explain why, if Bobby was simply lending a helping hand to his homicidal uncle, why would he then become the state's star witness against Steven Avery? That is an excellent question. Statement of the case and procedural history. This case began in early November 2005 with the disappearance of Teresa Halbach, a 25-year-old professional photographer. Teresa Halbach was reported missing on November 3rd, 2005. On November 5th, 2005, volunteer searchers found Teresa Halbach's Toyota RAV4 on the 40-acre site of the Avery Auto Salvage Yard, a salvage yard business where Steven Avery and other family members lived and worked. Teresa Halbach had photographed vehicles at this site previously at Steven Avery's request, according to state witness Bobby Dassey. Teresa Halbach was last seen walking towards Steven Avery's trailer on October 31st, 2005. After finding Teresa Halbach's RAV4, law enforcement searched the Avery property and over the course of the next 4 months discovered and identified evidence including burned bone fragments in and around a burn pit with DNA matching Teresa Halbach's, Steven Avery's, and Teresa Halbach's blood in the RAV4, the remnants of electronic devices and a camera, the same model as Teresa Halbach's, in a burn barrel, Teresa Halbach's RAV4 key in Steven Avery's bedroom with Steven Avery's DNA on it, Steven Avery's DNA on the hood latch of the RAV4, deposed the state later claimed by Steven Avery's sweaty hands, and a bullet in Steven Avery's garage containing Teresa Halbach's DNA. During Steven Avery's trial, Bobby Dassey was the state's primary witness against Steven Avery. The state used Bobby Dassey's testimony to establish that Teresa Halbach never left the Avery property alive. In his opening statement, prosecutor Ken Kratz explicitly told the jury of the significance of Bobby's observations on the date of Teresa Halbach's disappearance. Here's what Ken Kratz said. You are going to hear that Bobby was the last person, the last citizen that will have seen Teresa Halbach alive. During the trial, Bobby testified that he observed Teresa Halbach's SUV pulled up in his driveway at 2:30 p.m. on October 31st. Bobby testified that he then observed Teresa Halbach exit her vehicle and start taking pictures of his mom's maroon van right in front of his trailer. Bobby testified that he observed Teresa Halbach walking towards the door of Steven Avery's trailer. The following exchange occurred between prosecutor Ken Kratz and Bobby Dassey. This is a bit of a question and answer from the trial. After seeing this woman walking toward your Uncle Steven's, did you ever see this woman again? Bobby Dassey answered no. On March 18th, 2007, Steven Avery was convicted of first-degree intentional homicide and a felony in possession of a firearm. The jury found Steven Avery not guilty of mutilation of a corpse. On October 11th, 2019, Steven Avery appealed the circuit court's denial of his second post-conviction motion and all of its supplements. He filed motions to stay and remand concerning 2 additional claims. At this court's direction, Steven Avery raised his claims in his motions to the circuit court as supplemental post-conviction motions. The circuit court denied his motions to supplement. During the pendency of Steven Avery's appeal, a new witness, Mr. Thomas Sawinski, contacted Steven Avery's current post-conviction counsel in December of 2020. Thomas Sawinski stated that he had witnessed Bobby and one other individual, a bearded man, pushing Teresa Halbach's RAV4 onto the Avery salvage yard in the early morning hours of November 5th, 2005. Thomas Sawinski claimed he had reported this information to the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. On April 10th, 2021, Thomas Sawinski provided an affidavit to Steven Avery's current post-conviction counsel that stated, Mr. Sawinski was a motor route driver for a newspaper company and delivered papers to the Avery salvage yard in the early morning hours of November 5th, 2005. Prior to delivering the newspapers to the Avery salvage yard, he turned onto the Avery property and witnessed 2 individuals, a shirtless Bobby Dassey and an unidentified older male suspiciously pushing a dark RAV4 down Avery Road towards the junkyard. The RAV4 did not have its lights on. Thomas Sawinski drove past the two men and delivered the newspapers to the Avery mailbox. He then turned around and drove back towards the exit. When he reached the RAV4 still over there, Bobby attempted to step in front of his car to block him from leaving the property. Thomas Sawinski came within 5 feet of Bobby Dassey, and his headlights were on Bobby during this entire time. Then Thomas Sawinski swerved into a shallow ditch to escape Bobby and exit the property. Thomas Sawinski states in his affidavit that he called out "Paperboy gotta go" because he was afraid for his safety. He further stated that Bobby looked him in the eye and did not appear happy to see Thomas Sawinski there. After Thomas Sawinski learned that Teresa Halbach's car was later found in the day on November 5th, 2005, he realized the significance of what he had observed and immediately contacted the Manitowoc Sheriff's Office. On April 12, 2021, Stephen Avery filed a motion for remand and stay of appeal on this court containing Thomas Sawinski's original affidavit. On July 28, 2021, the court issued an opinion upholding the circuit court's summary denial of Stephen Avery's claims raised in his post-conviction motion and 2 supplement motions, holding that Stephen Avery's motions are insufficient on their face, entitling him to a hearing. However, this court did not remand Mr. Avery's case for a circuit court ruling on the claim in his most recent filing concerning the new witness, Thomas Sawinski, and reserved Stephen Avery's ability to raise this issue in a successive motion. Specifically, the court instructed the following. As discussed below, we are not addressing Stephen Avery's most recent filing to this court. See our discussion of Motion 6, which seeks to directly connect Dassey to Teresa Halbach's murder. If Stephen Avery wishes to raise this claim, he will need to bring a new motion. That motion would need to survive both, and it lists the case scrutiny, to be found to have merit, in which case the evidence presented might supply the missing direct connection. In that event, the VELIECD evidence that might become relevant to showing Brendan Dassey's motive and might bear on whether Dassey is or should have been a viable Denny suspect. We express no opinion on the merit of any such motion, as all such issues would be for the circuit court to decide in the first instance. Regarding claims that Stephen Avery raised in his motion to reconsider this circuit court's October 3rd, 2017 order denying his second post-conviction motion and its 2 supplements, the court found neither we nor the circuit court have squarely considered whether these claims are procedurally barred under that case. It's ESCALONA-NARANJO, or whether Avery pled sufficient materials entitling him to a hearing. Such consideration would have to come on a separately filed Wisconsin statute motion, and we express no opinion as to whether such claims would be barred in the event of such a motion is filed. Therefore, this court did not rule on certain issues contained in Stephen Avery's prior motion to reconsider and its 2 supplements. So that's where we're going to leave off on part 1. We're going to pick right back up with part 2. Let me know what you think of everything in part 1 here. The big thing coming from part 1 is, why is Bobby Dassey helping Stephen Avery if he's going to be the state's star witness? That makes absolutely no sense. Let me know what you think. Leave some comments below. Hope you're having a good day, and I will see you again soon.